We are in a new year. Yesterday was a new year. It feels like a new year, right? Even though it's not January 2nd or something. So the Murli today is about the impact of Baba's knowledge on your processes of thinking. And sometimes devotees ask for specific things, and so Baba's taking up that devotees ask for a good intellect, either for themselves or for the people who live around them, because if you are living with someone who is a very difficult person, then part of their problem is that their thinking is very weird. And so then they ask God to give this person a good intellect so that they would think straight. And that's only possible when you start studying Gyan. Because once you take in the knowledge, especially right at the beginning, you have to rethink how you think. And then it's an ongoing process, but it becomes more and more refined as time goes by. So this is 6th of November, and the essence, sweet children, at the confluence age, you receive good intellects and the elevated direction, Shrimat, from the Father, through which you change from Brahmins into deities. So Shrimat is more than elevated directions. These words are quite difficult to translate into English, like Shri, for example. And it really means truth. Truth that is revealed knowledge. And scientific knowledge is not revealed knowledge, it's discovered information. But you cannot discover this. If you could have, you would have a long time ago. But this is revealed knowledge. So the question is, which intoxication should you children have so that your behavior becomes very royal? And I don't know whether this will work or not, but let's see. So you should have the intoxication. Oh, we are sitting personally in front of God. It's actually quite difficult for a person to realize this, because if you really realize that you're sitting in front of God, you would be terrified. And so he comes in his gentle form so that we will listen, because if you're terrified, you can't listen. You're just, ah. So, but then if you're not terrified, you would not really realize who's in front of you. So it's a wonder. So we also have this thought: we will go from here and become crown princes. Have you really realized that? That's another thing. Masters of the world. When you have such intoxication is not really the right word, because that means you're drunk, but maybe ecstasy, although that's also the name of a drug. So I don't know what they've done to the English language. But anyway, when you have that realization, your behavior will become royal, and you will speak with very sweet words. And there will also be a lot of love for one another. So it's a matter of really understanding who you are, who everyone else is, and who you were. And the song is, the flame is ignited in the mehfil. So the mehfil is not a happy gathering of moths at all. A mehfil is the gathering of poets. And so that's different. But it says here, happy gathering of moths, because they will die in the flame. But the relationship of a poet with God is something else. So this is the one he's talking about, the poets who realize God and go into that spiritual ecstasy. Om Shanti. Sweet children, sweetest children, you spiritual children have come and become Brahmins. And you have definitely understood from the spiritual father that you are confluence-aged Brahmins. So that's different from Lokic Brahmins, who are Brahmins by birth and the priest caste. The Brahmin, the father has opened the locks on your intellects. We now understand that this is the confluence age. So the whole world is going one way and you're going other way. And it's a time of absolute metamorphosis, disruption. All of what you had become in the Iron Age has to collapse. And something new has to take its place. And it's quite difficult to live like that. But that's what it is. So we now understand that this is the confluence age. The people who are now impure and corrupt will become pure in the future and will be called pure, most elevated beings. Lakshmi and Narayan became the most elevated by making spiritual effort, purusharat, at some time. There has to be their history. These are people, these are human beings, so they have a history. So when was the kingdom of Lakshmi and Narayan established? Neither in the Iron Age nor in the Golden Age, but on the cusp. Heaven is established only at the confluence age. But no one goes into this much detailed expansion, all the details of how heaven is established at this time. Now, people know that after the Iron Age, there is the Golden Age New World. They know that, but they don't know how that happens. So there has to be the confluence age, a transition period. And confluence is where the river meets the ocean. And if it's a very big river meeting the ocean, it's a huge currents are running, and it's very, very difficult to cross the river at the place where it meets the ocean because of the disturbances. So there must be the confluence age. There would then be a new kingdom in the new world. So we have to go from democracy to monarchy or via anarchy. So we have to be prepared for anarchy. And that's very disturbing also. So let your intellects work on this. You know that you are receiving good intellects, good capability to process concepts. And you are also receiving Shrimat, the concepts, from the Father. The devotees say, oh God, give this person good intellect, good understanding. That means good directions. He is the Father of the whole world, and he is the one who gives good directions to everyone. He comes at the confluence age and he gives good directions to his children. And his children are known in the scriptures as the Pandav community and the deity community. So in the story of the Mahabharata, it talks about the Kauravas, Pandavas, and Yadavas. But no one can understand who the Brahman community is. Nobody thinks that the Pandavas are the Brahmins because they're Kshatriyas. So it's a bit difficult to be something else than what you are, according to the scriptures. But now Baba says, you are spiritual warriors, no doubt, but at this time you are the Brahman community and you are becoming the deity community. So the community of Brahmins can only be created through Brahma. So this is called Sampradaya, the community of Brahmins, born through the mouth of Brahma. Only the Supreme Father, the Supreme Soul, creates this creation, this community of people through the mouth of Brahma. And it is because there is Prajapita Brahma that there are so many Brahma Kumars and Kumaris. So Praja means all the people. How can people attain Sadgati, and how can they reach the right destination unless they come and take knowledge through you Brahmins? So destination is as a result of instructions. So Sadgati is always translated as salvation, but it's definitely a matter of a destination. And you have two destinations. One is Gati, which is the soul world. You have to go there, but you don't stay there long, just a few seconds. And then you come to the golden age. So in the soul world, there's no time. So if you stay there for 1 second or 4,999 years, it's the same thing. So we don't bother to wait that long, because why would you miss the story of the world? Many people will come to you. The sannyasis and people of other religions will come to claim their inheritance from the Father. They get an inheritance, but they don't have a role in heaven. So they will take Baba's message because that has to be given, that the Father has come. And at this time, none of the people who call themselves Hindus know about the deity Dharma. So they worship gods and goddesses, but they don't really think that they could become gods and goddesses, even though it says so in the scriptures. But they don't believe it, because gods and goddesses are immortal, and so they should be around here somewhere. So some pundits say, well, you want to find the deities, they live on the moon. So it was a big deal in the 60s when the Americans went to the moon and they didn't find any deities. So then the pundit says, it's because they're invisible. So they got around it like that. But it's really something different. So those who were first Sato Pradhan can't call themselves deities anymore because they have become Tamo. So you children know that Ravan's kingdom is here, over the world here. And the birth of the Supreme Father, the Supreme Soul, who is also known as Ram, takes place here too. So there are 3 Rams, which causes further confusion. One Ram is the soul, that's Ram. Other Ram is God. Another Ram is the king of the Silver Age. So they get all confused with that. So it is sung that Patit Pavan Sitaram. So the purifier is Ram of Sita. So who made you impure? And who is Ravan? And why do they call out to the purifier father? So the story of the Ramayana is the story of the soul who got captured by the force of negativity and got exiled from heaven. So they put it as a different story, but that's what it really is. So Baba explains the symbolic meaning of all these legends. No one knows this. No one understands that the 5 vices that are contained within them are actually Ravan. So if you want to set Ravan on fire, you can't set yourself on fire, that won't work. But you have to have the fire of yoga to destroy it. So those who do not have 5 vices are the community of Ram. But it is not the kingdom of Ram now. So Gandhi always wanted Ram Raj, the kingdom of Ram. And so it wasn't clear which kind of kingdom of Ram. So this is why everyone desires a new world and a pure new kingdom. So Shiv Baba is also called Ram, but they consider Ram to be the supreme soul, and so they forgot Shiv Baba. So if Ram is God, then Shiva is not God. So if Shiva is God, then Ram is not God. But then there are so many incarnations, so it creates massive confusion because Ram is one of the incarnations. So you can explain what Ram Raj is, the kingdom of Ram. In the scriptures, they wrote that Sita was abducted, but how is it possible for anyone to abduct a queen of the ruling king? It's very difficult. There are many scriptures, and the main scripture is the Gita. And it is written in the scriptures that the Brahman, deity, and Kshatriya dharmas were established through Brahma. So that means God establishes 3 dharmas. So the Brahman dharma is this, and the golden age dharma of deities is those BKs who succeed, and the silver age dharma of Kshatriya is the BKs who failed. Now, you still go to heaven, but second class heaven. So Brahma has so many children, and they are all the mouth-born creation, the mouth-born progeny. It's not possible to give birth to this many children through a womb. Can you imagine? And 1 million children from one womb? I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. So since Saraswati is also mouth-born progeny of Brahma, she cannot be the wife of Brahma. So in the scriptures, they say Saraswati is the daughter of Brahma, but he was in love with her. So that was an incestuous relationship. So already the scriptures have prepared people for all sorts of unsalubrious behavior. So they don't understand. The father says, you become Brahmins through the mouth of Brahma. You become my children, that is adopted children. He says, you are mine, and you say yes, and that's adoption through the mouth. So it's fairly simple. You children know that there is much praise of Shiv Baba. The father is the purifier and also the liberator. And everybody sings this in their prayers, but because they don't understand what they're talking about, you have to first of all introduce them to the Father. He is the purifier, and he is the God of the Gita. So they have to deal with the idea of Krishna being the God of the Gita and Ram being the purifier, plus the Ganges is also the purifier. So very, very difficult for Hindus to figure out any of this until Shiv Baba comes and tells it. So Shiv Baba is incorporeal. So he must definitely have spoken the knowledge of the Gita at some point. The body through whom he speaks the knowledge is given the name Brahma, because Brahma is the word for creator. So he has to use the name Brahma for the instrument through whom he creates, because otherwise, where else could Brahma come from? There's no story about the birth of Brahma. He's just there. And so who is the father of Brahma? And Brahma is the only deity with a beard. All the others have no beards, because beards come in the later part of the cycle. In the early part of the cycle, no shaving, so you'd be happy about that. So who is the creator of Brahma, Vishnu, Shankar? So they say Trimurti Brahma, and we say Trimurti Shiva. So Shiva is the creator. These are very deep questions. You ask this question to a person who knows devotion, and they will not really know how to manage this question. So these are deep questions. People speak of Trimurti, the Trimurti deities, Brahma, Vishnu, Shankar, but where did they come from? So the father explains, the creator of this one, Brahma, is also God, the highest on high, who is called Shiva. These three deities are beings of light. So they are not historical figures. They are templates or architectural drawings that you can find in the subtle regions. And so people can have visions of them. Then you have to explain what is the meaning. So they are representations of the spiritual practice that you do in the confluence age. So they are not people of flesh and bones, but people with gross intellect, that means very Tamil intellect, they are unable to comprehend anything subtle. They can only handle physical representations, and they can't go any further than that. That's the way it is. You have to explain that God is the highest on high, and that he gives you the inheritance of heaven through Brahma. That means your inheritance is the knowledge. You will go to heaven, but then you have to create your position in heaven through applying the knowledge. It is sung that it did not take God long to change human beings into deities. So they say from Brahma to Vishnu is 1 second. And in the Guru Granth Sahib, it says it didn't take very long, but they didn't say how long. Then they portray Brahma as emerging from the navel of Vishnu. Now, is it possible for a baby to come out of somebody's navel? How are you going to do that? And the father sits here, and of course Vishnu is considered as a male, so a male cannot produce a child through his navel. I don't think so. Don't have the arrangements. The father sits here and explains all the secrets, the symbols. But people should at least understand. You know that for the soul, it is said, sinful soul, papatma, punya atma, sinful soul, pure soul. But it doesn't mean that pure souls are God. No. The Father, the Supreme Soul, is ever pure. And those who are Tamo Pradhan are called impure. In the Golden Age, when there was happiness, prosperity, there was no question of any hardship or sorrow. But there are people who think it's heaven now. People who have a lot of money and conveniences, they say it's heaven for them. They don't understand anything. But they will come and claim their inheritance from the Father at the end. So everything, people will lose everything. Then they will think about God. Only you children know that you are establishing your kingdom. No others can become the masters of the world. It is only in the golden age that you rule the kingdom of the entire world. In the iron age, you cannot rule the whole world. And no one knows this. They try, but they try using military force. And it's a spiritual law that you cannot rule the whole world in that manner. So they can try as much as they want. No one knows this. It is also written in the Gita that the great war, the Mahabharata war, happened, and that all the religions means also cultures, civilizations, the big communities, they were all destroyed. When a banyan tree dries up and its branches rub against each other, it catches fire. Usually they say this for bamboo, not banyan, so they might have translated it wrong. I couldn't check. But this is in certain parts of India, especially in the far east of India, it's just oceans of bamboo. And when there's a drought, the wind makes them rub against each other and it catches fire and becomes like a California fire. So this is the same for the human world tree. And people rub up against each other and get into fights. So this tree has become completely dried out, decayed, and so it must also be set alight. They will fight and totally destroy one another. They continue to manufacture instruments for creating fire. There's incendiary bombs and so on. And there will now be massive fires through atomic bombs. They do not know this secret. The Iron Age, hell, will now change and become heaven. So you must have much spiritual intoxication in this knowledge. You have to check yourselves and see whether you are maintaining this intoxication, this high. We are the children of God and we are receiving our inheritance of heaven from him. So therefore, when speaking to each other, you must speak in a very royal way. Royal means behave nicely to each other. Everything has to be learned here. So one interpretation of sanskaras is how you learn to behave as a child. So some BKs don't know how to behave. So Baba says, okay, let me teach you how to behave. So you will then take these same sanskaras with you, become very sweet, and also maintain great intoxication, this kind of self-honor of who you are and behave accordingly. We are the children of Shiv Baba, and we are those who will claim the status of a deity. So we should speak to each other with great love. As yet, flowers are not emerging from the mouths of you children. Flowers means sweet words. So you can have diamonds or flowers going out of your mouth. Diamonds are the truth and flowers are sweet words. You are so elevated. You should remember that you are the children of Shiv Baba and you are going to become emperors in the golden age. That means you will be crown princes of the world. A crown prince is the heir to the throne. So you children should have the internal happiness that you are sitting in front of God, from whom you receive the inheritance of heaven. You must follow his Shrimat. You know that your kingdom is in process of getting established, and all are required in a kingdom. You know, there's this saying, it takes all kinds to make a world. You need a bit of everything. However, only jewels should keep emerging from the mouths of you children. So the story of the two children, the two boys, Rup and Basant, flowers came out of the mouth of one and jewels came out of the mouth of the other. So Rup and Basant, the form is the diamonds, knowledge, and the essence is the fragrance, the virtues. So all these stories refer to this time. So Baba is Rup and Basant. The Father is the ocean of knowledge, and he rains knowledge. So Indra is the god of knowledge. So this is also called the court of Indra. And in the court of Indra, only pure people are allowed. Impure people get discovered, pushed out. So he rains knowledge. It doesn't mean that God Indra is showering the rain of water, but water means clouds form naturally and then they shower. This is the cycle of water. But in the golden age, even the 5 elements become your slaves. It means they are totally cooperative with you. Here, human beings have enslaved each other. And here you have to make a lot of effort for everything. A lot of effort to get the ground to be fertile and produce food, a lot of effort to have a family that's functional. But there, everything happens automatically. So all the plants grow nicely. The rain is doing what it should do. It rains every morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. You do not do Amrit Vela in the golden age. You wake up afterwards. But therefore, you children should constantly remember Baba so that the mercury of your happiness stays always high. The scientists think a lot about matter, and you children have to churn the knowledge, think deeply about the knowledge. Sometimes the impact of the knowledge is very good and sometimes less on you. And this is called churning knowledge. So you create your stage by churning. So you children can see the stage of Brahma Baba, and Baba also shares his experience. So because your relationship with the Murli varies day by day, sometimes you have a lot of enthusiasm and sometimes less. Sometimes very good points emerge. Sometimes Baba also helps. She Baba helps Brahma Baba, She Baba helps you. And you can also feel this. Baba never takes a Murli in his hand. So he speaks, you know, one of the kind of rules for Brahma Kumaris is you don't give lectures from notes. That's not okay. It has to come from your heart, and there's no notebook in there. So when children write things for magazines, Baba looks at that to make sure that they're not making mistakes. Many good Murli points are printed in the magazines and they are sent everywhere. And so we have a magazine on, what's it called? Gyanamrit, World Renewal Magazine. These are from, I think Jagdish Bhai started it, and Brij Mohan, very interested in this. Now he does, he's looking after the Peace of Mind TV nowadays. So if Murlis are not sent to some places, Baba says, well, what more do you want once you have taken the 7-day course and understood the knowledge of the creator and the creation? Even if you only have one Murli, it'll do the job. Continue to make effort to burn away the 5 vices. You don't have any other difficulty. Your children can go to any spiritual gathering. There should be that enthusiasm to go and serve, go and tell people the knowledge in the temples. When people of all religions come together for these interfaith conferences, you should explain that each one's religion is different. You know, they try to make a combination of all the religions, but that's not possible. They speak about the brotherhood of man, but they are not able to unite themselves. They just say it for the sake of saying something. So if you practically go to any interfaith conference, the people hold firm, very firm to their own place, and they represent it, their own religion, and then they listen, and then they go home without making any changes. It's always like that. My father says, I come and I make you into Brahmins. So there's a different dharma. So people who become Brahmins are from all sorts of religions, but you're not actually converting from one religion to another. You're just understanding what's true. And then automatically, when you understand it, you get it, that's it, you have it. So he makes you into Brahmins, and then you establish the deity dharma. There is no other religion there. There's no religion at all. We have to call it dharma or civilization, but no religion as such. This is the same Mahabharat war, and this is also mentioned in the Gita. This is the only study, and the one who is teaching you is just one. And the father says, when this knowledge finishes, I will go back home. I have to speak the knowledge at the end of the Iron Age, and I have to come every cycle. And I cannot come earlier or later by even 1 second. So the drama is fixed, and when he comes is fixed, and when he goes is fixed. People don't like being fixed, but they're fixed. Even all your sins are fixed. So no use being guilty. It's complicated because you're not allowed to do what you have to do because it's fixed in drama, but you're still not allowed to do it, and you do it anyway. And it's not your fault, but it is your fault. You will be called to account. So you could argue with Dharmaraj. So Baba says, I have to come. It cannot be earlier or later by even a second. And when this knowledge is completed, you will reach your karmatit stage, and then destruction will take place. Day by day, your service will increase. Here, people do not have purity or divine virtues. Look at the great contrast between the great contrast of purity there is between here and there. You are now sitting at the confluence age. So the energies of purity and impurity are acting like electric currents on both directions on you. Hope you don't mind. So this is the most elevated confluence age. Elevated in this sense, in this case, is a translation for Purushottam and not for Shri. So you find the word elevated used for tons of different words, but Purushottam means that everything that's going on here, good, bad, or indifferent, is to be used for you to carry yourself to the highest possible stage. You are now becoming those most elevated people. But there also has to be that splendor and behavior. Splendor, not in the sense of dress up in gold and jewels and all that, but you have to be in your self-honor and conduct yourself as a very high quality person. But you have to also be a very high quality person. Do not let stones emerge from your lips. Stones are verbal abuse. That's stones. Only jewels should emerge. Jewels are words of truth, but they can't be harsh. If you would get a bunch of diamonds and throw them at people with slingshots, that would be really bad. So you can send truth, which is dressed in flowers. So you are now becoming beautiful deities. God comes and makes you into gods and goddesses. Deities are called gods and goddesses, but no one knows who made them that. You have the full knowledge of the creator and the creation in your intellects, and you also have the responsibility of making others like yourselves. Many will continue to come here, but only Brahmins are those who can rotate the knowledge. So you have to learn circular thinking. You can only apply circular thinking to Gyan. You cannot apply it to any other type of knowledge because that's linear knowledge, which requires linear thinking. So you have to be good at linear thinking as well as circular thinking. So Brahmins become Swadarsan Chakradhari. And it is only you children who experience the storms of Maya, because you're in between very opposing currents and opposing types of thinking, opposing civilizations. Sometimes when there are storms, it'll break your bones. That means you break your celibacy. He says that's called breaking your bones. While moving along, some do disservice. Baba says, do not perform unclean karma. You are mouth-born Brahmins. Those are Brahmins born through the womb, and there is so much difference. Those Lokic Brahmins take people on physical pilgrimages, whereas yours is a spiritual pilgrimage. You are receiving your inheritance, the knowledge, from the unlimited Father. But none of those Brahmins has the wisdom to understand that they are Brahmins by caste, and you are also Brahmins by sanskaras. However, who are the true Brahmins? It's very difficult in India for people to actually accept that people from other backgrounds can become Brahmins. So I remember one time this issue was big time in Madhuban. And so Dadi Prakash Mani stood up in front of the huge gathering and said, all double foreigners stand up. So everybody stood up. She said, are you vegetarian? Yes. Are you taking bath when you have to take bath? Yes. Are you studying the Murli every day? Yes. Etc., etc. So she asked all the questions. And then she said to the big gathering, okay, why don't you think they're Brahmins? There's no difference between these double foreigners and you, so come on. But, you know, part of soul consciousness is you have to come out from preconceptions. And that's quite difficult for people. Can you make a racist into not a racist? It requires a lot of education and putting somebody face to face and all this. So it's so easy. Sukanya was saying, even in India, there is difficulty for people to accept that Brahmins are the highest because the Brahmin community has a history of performing atrocities against lower caste people. So this is the problem of the Iron-aged religion. So Baba says those Brahmins cannot call themselves Brahma Kumars because they're not directly born through Brahma. If you tell them, oh, did you get born through the mouth through Brahma? Did you get born twice? Because a Brahmin has to be born twice in one birth. This is why the Christians talk about born again Christians. It's a copy of this. So those Brahmins cannot call themselves Brahma Kumars. You call yourselves Brahma Kumars. And that proves that Brahma exists. You can't be the son of somebody if your father isn't there. It's impossible. However, because these things do not enter their intellects, they don't ask. Baba comes every cycle and explains these things to your children. You are Brahmins, children of Brahma, and that makes you brothers and sisters. So as children of Shiv Baba, we're all brothers, genderless beings of light. And then when you get a body, it could be one type or another. So you have to be brothers or sisters. So since you're brothers and sisters, you can't engage in vice because that would be incest and people don't really approve of that. So if someone does indulge in vice, then he is defaming the Brahmin clan. So in a family, if you find out there's incest going on, then that's called defamation of the family, even though it goes on secretly, but what to do? After calling yourself a Brahma Kumar or Kumari, you cannot become impure. You cannot practice, you cannot break your purity. Acha. To the sweetest, beloved, long lost and now found children, love, remembrance, and good morning from the mother, the father, Bap Dada. And the spiritual father says namaste to the spiritual children. The spiritual children say namaste to the spiritual father. So the essence for Dharana, churn whatever you hear in the Murli. Keep rotating it until it becomes, when you spin something, then something comes out. It's like a chemical system, a chemistry system. You are becoming most elevated. Therefore, your behavior has to be very royal. Do not throw stones from your mouths. Secondly, understand your responsibility to make many like yourselves. That means whatever you know, tell them. Whatever is carrying you forward, carry somebody else forward with that too. And keep yourself engaged in doing service. Do not do disservice by performing unclean karma. And the blessing is, may you become free from all attractions with your constant and stable stage, experience supersensuous joy. So supersensuous joy is not an emotion. Sensuous joy is all about emotions. And most BKs don't get it. So you have to churn this, the difference between a feeling that can arise in you that is directly connected with sense perception and a feeling that arises in you that's directly arises from spinning the knowledge, because you would experience something, but it would not be called an emotion. because emotions are directly connected with sense perceptions, and these emotions go all the way from really good to really bad. But the experience you have from realizing what Baba's talking about by churning it doesn't have opposite. You either get it or you don't, but you don't get it as a negative feeling. You can only get it as, wow, something like that. So that is the meaning of supersensuous joy. So when you become free from the attractions of the senses, so attraction presupposes repulsion, and also you become free of the influence of all your relationships with human beings, then you'll be able to experience this supersensuous joy, because you can only get to that level when you're independent of the consciousness of who the world tells you you are. That means they like you, they don't like you, you are this, you are that. You can have this or have that, status symbols, any of that stuff is, you have to be completely independent from that to go to that other space, a very different space of consciousness. When you are influenced by any of the senses, the different things that attract you create obstacles to the experience of supersensuous joy and being happy. You see, this is a very misleading translation, because it keeps you totally in the body conscious and in emotions. So what to do, but you have to understand. Now, when your intellect becomes free from attractions, because your emotions are in the mind, supersensuous joy is in the intellect. And so the intellect is an instrument that's quite different from the mind. But both of them are invisible. So it's quite difficult for people to segregate the intellect and the mind. But when your intellect is very well nourished, all the stuff of the mind is something that you can be detached from quite easily, because you're on another level. So when your intellect becomes free from the attractions and stabilized on one thing, then the upheaval, that means the emotions, your relationship with your emotions is relatively neutral. And anyway, you have the powers. So some huge movement within, which would normally make you tremendously, highs and lows, upset, this and that, you don't buy into it. You just don't. And you say, okay, fair enough. That doesn't mean that you're insensitive, but it means you're on another level. And people find that very scary to hear about, let alone do, because their whole life is based on the emotions. So then by having this constant stable stage, then you go further up, and there you are with God, and that's called bliss. You can't have bliss here. You call it bliss, but it isn't, because it's this swings and roundabouts. So always keep the line of your intellect clear, and you will be able to know the feelings of others. You'll be able to sense exactly what's going on in them. However much they hide it, you will know, Okay. And then you will also not give them distress, because, you know, people, we talked yesterday about this ego defense postures and things like that. So sometimes people become very aggressive, and then you think, well, this person is an aggressive person, but it's just a front for something else. And when your line is clear, you see what's behind all this front. And then you can relate to the person as who they are, rather than as all these performances that they use to protect themselves from their vulnerability. And so you can throw stones at their shields and it won't hurt them. But if you get past their shield and throw stones, then that's really not good. Some people do that. They get minus points in Baba's register for that. So it's interesting, huh? Hmm? If you understand a person's vulnerability, you are in a position to really hurt them. And if you do, and Baba will be watching and seeing, do you abuse your power? And anyone who abuses their power, they get very heavy minus points in Baba's register, because that's a real big no-no. And there was an Avyat Murli about that one time. I haven't seen it circling around again, but I heard it live, all about that, about how Baba will test Brahmins by enabling them to be in positions of power. Either it could be like a political position, or in interpersonal relationships. You're in a position of power because someone opens up, and you had to be very sensitive. And if you abuse your power, which people do pretty easily, because there is this vice, it's a really bad vice, the lust for power. Lust for power makes you develop the skills in opening people up and then sticking it to them. That's heavy violence. And you can do it quite, it's quite difficult for somebody to catch you, because it's very skilled use of violence. And the Baba will see and catch and say, hey, you commit this crime, there's a very heavy sentence for this crime. So, watch it. And especially Baba said in this Murli, okay, you're being taught to be crown princes, you're being taught to be the people who have actual power over large numbers of people. But if you, in the process of gaining that, if you abuse your power, that is a minus point, and it destroys your status. So, so you have to be aware about that, because the desire for power is something that people really have, and it's a really big vice. And desire for power comes in people who have a lot of psychological damage. You have a question?
Sometimes in a team, people don't take initiative. And some work has to be performed, work has to be done, work has to go on. If someone takes initiative, then people say, oh, this person desires power. Very tricky.
It's very tricky, yes. And it happens to me a lot. And I used to be very perplexed by it. I'm a person who gets bored by boring things really easily. And so what I used to do, because all these ceremonies and whatnot, I just said, it's not my cup of tea. So, okay, so what to do? So I find work for myself, and I do this and that and the other, high intensity. And then people would say to me, you are a very ambitious person. I say, what are you talking about? But I didn't get it, that they're making assumptions based on preconceptions that is also connected with this idea that is quite widespread in India, that people who are in a high position don't work, and they get everybody else to do the work. And then there's also this idea that people are fundamentally lazy and they don't want to do anything. So this combination of preconceptions about people, which might apply in India, but it doesn't apply so much in the West, because in the West, it's the Protestant world of the West, not the Catholic world. It's a different culture. In the Protestant world of the West, they talk about the work ethic. So in USA, there is work ethic. In Germany, where I have been for several years, the work ethic is the highest value. And on the gateways of all the concentration camps, there was a slogan which said, work makes you free. And so they would make people do forced labor. And they would say, you work until you're dead and then you'll get free. So concentration camp is not very nice, but this is the ethic of the Protestants. And so for me, if you're bored, then you occupy yourself with something. And then you see Baba says, do service, do service, do service. So I would occupy myself with something that I thought of as being serviceable, and then I wasn't bored anymore. And I didn't know these preconceptions because they don't exist in my background. And it took me a while to figure out that, when you evaluate a person based on criteria that don't apply, you get it really wrong. And it's quite difficult to become independent of your culture when you're with people who are of the same culture, because you have a tacit agreement with everyone that whatever our preconceptions are, they're not preconceptions. But when you go to another culture, then your preconceptions really show up. So when we, myself, Chandruben, were living in Clement Street, we were two sisters and there were, I think, 4 brothers. And each one was from a different religion, a different race, a different culture. And we were all living together. And the most interesting thing about it is that all the preconceptions based on culture were really flying in your face 24/7. And that was really interesting for me, because then you can see it. And then you really have to figure out a relationship with each other, which is independent of cultural preconceptions. And many times in the BK world, people will make an announcement. There is no cultural distinction. Excuse me. You take off your glasses and see, because everyone comes from a context, a cultural context. And if you say that they don't, it means you're blind. It doesn't mean anything else. You're just blind. But the only way that you can be blind in that way is if you're only with people who are of the same culture as you. Then you have no option. You have to be blind. And so it's very interesting to me that Baba, especially in United States, which is a world of immigrants, everyone is from somewhere else. You might have been from somewhere else for several generations, but you're still from somewhere else. And so you have this mishmash of all these different cultures. And so in the United States, the way they handle it is to come up with this idea of an American, you see. So in the previous times, they used to talk about a hyphenated Americans, Japanese American, Irish American, Portuguese American, this type with a hyphen. And then that's kind of gone. And now you have to be an American American. And nobody really knows what that is, because these cultures that still persist from generation to generation are still there. And in a place like Los Angeles, where I was living for many years, there are 84 languages used in the school system. 84 languages in one city. And what people tend to do is to gather together where other people are of similar culture. And so you have Koreatown, Japantown, all these different places where people of specific backgrounds will gather together, and then you'll have shops which will cater to the food tastes of that particular community and so on. And then when you're really adventurous, you can go and mix yourself with everything, but still you're rooted in your own cultural roots, no matter what. Then we have this idea of Brahman culture. And Brahman culture, I think, is really about removing preconceptions. And I don't think it's possible to remove preconceptions unless you have no majority and minority. Because if you have a majority, then the minority is some sort of pariah, some kind of pariah. And so they have to comply with the majority. Otherwise, their differences will be considered as badness. But if you don't have a majority, then you can't do that, because everybody's equally different from everybody else. So then you have to find, okay, well, what is common? And so common is Shrimat. And Shrimat means be soul conscious. I remember Baba, it's the same Baba for all of us. And study the Murli, same Murli for all of us. And practice purity, we know what that is. And so this is what you have in common. And then gradually you live together for a few decades, and maybe you will come into harmony. But if in your center there's only people from a particular culture, you won't actually be able to do that, because there's no way, no circumstances. But over here, we do have the circumstances where you have all different varieties of Indians, not just one variety, all varieties from all different regions and backgrounds and castes and whatnot. Then you have all kinds of other people, Hispanic people, different varieties of Asian people, different varieties of European people, and all mixed up, you see. But where you have a majority and then a minority, the majority always pushes itself on the minority and always views the minority as substandard. And politically, if your minority gets bigger than 10%, then you have civil war. And we have that situation. So there's conflict. Because when the minority is bigger than 10%, it has enough power to say, excuse me, do not treat me this way. And they will have enough power to say, you know, I'm equally a soul, I'm equally human, I'm equally educated, I'm equally this, that, and the other. So don't discriminate against me on the basis of race or religion or caste or culture or whatever. And, you know, people ask about the relationship of BKs and human rights. And in a few weeks, I have to participate in a conversation about this in Stanford University. And so these are people who really are concerned about the perception of people who meditate as being people who disregard the whole matter of human rights because they're not politically active. But in fact, we may not be politically active in the external form, but in this respect, we are very, I think, very useful for the discussion of human rights in amongst people who are all different, because we're doing it day after day after day with each other in all sorts of different configurations, in centers, in regions, in globally and whatever, which means that we have a lot of experience of what does it mean. And it's very different when you're talking about it from the point of view of, you know, in the workplace or in the school system, because culture is formed in the family. And so, for example, in families where there is a mixed race marriage or a mixed religion marriage, there's a lot of conflict because it causes all of the prejudices to fly in your face. And my Lokik background is quite interesting because I grew up in half Catholic, half Protestant, half French, half English, and these are totally enemies with each other, you know. And as a small child, I used to scratch my head and say, these guys have no clue. They really don't know what they're talking about. I was just like 4 years old, and I thought, something wrong with these people, really wrong. I used to fight them and say, you know, you say one thing, you're doing the opposite. What kind of humans are you? They would say, what kind of kid are you? So, but if you grow up and live only in one culture, then you take in the preconceptions along with your food and water, and so you have no possibility of distinguishing what is a preconception and what's not a preconception. No way. So to be in a mixed situation is really very, very good. But Baba's taking us to a pretty high level because he says, okay, you have to be beyond gender. You have to really be beyond gender, really be beyond color, really be beyond culture, etc., etc. So because you're going to the golden age, and the criteria is that you never abuse power. And he's giving you more and more and more power. So as you become higher and higher BK, you have greater and greater possibility to cause huge amount of damage. So don't, because you can. And this is the thing, a kingdom means you are the law. And so there were these expressions that you used to hear, especially from Didi Manmohini, about if you are a lawmaker, you cannot be a lawbreaker. You know, so it means you really have to walk your talk. And then Baba talked about balance of love and law. And all of this is about this exam. Baba says, okay, I'll give you power. Let me see if you can handle it. Does it go to your head? If so, fail. Do you abuse it? Fail. Go to the bottom of the class. But many people, they don't really quite understand that they are given power under being monitored by Baba, step by step by step. Do you abuse that power? Do you use your power as an ego defense mechanism and become abusive because you feel less than, or because you feel inferior or something? This is the ego drama. So it's very secretly there in the Murli. So when you need to know it, which we do need to know it, it's there. But if you're, understanding Gyan on a more superficial, simple level, you don't have to be troubled by that matter because it's not your problem. You're a simple BK. We have simple BKs all the way to very complicated BKs. That's okay. Takes all kinds to make a world.
Please explain the Murli point. When there is consciousness of mind, the intellect is completely turned around.
Okay. When there is consciousness of mind. Okay. What this means, this thing called consciousness of mind, it means this as a second part of the idea of I and mine, right? So there is the soul conscious I, and there's a body conscious I. So there are some people who think that they can get rid of it by using the expression this soul, but it doesn't actually change your consciousness at all. You're just changing your vocabulary. So we don't have to change the vocabulary. We have to change the consciousness and really think about what does it mean to be I, the soul, naked and alone with nothing. Your inheritance is Gyan. So all you have is Gyan. So dispossess yourself of all the things that you think you have. So this feeling of possessiveness is consciousness of mind. And this consciousness of mind is like a really weird translation, which is incomprehensible right there. So I prefer to say, what is Baba talking about here? And he's talking about possessiveness. And possessiveness is not just your physical possessions, but if you use them as status symbols to add to your sense of identity, that all becomes consciousness of mind. I'm the center in charge. The center is mine. All these students are mine. All this money is mine. All this furniture is mine. These cars are mine. And therefore. So you use syllogisms in a funny way. And that means that your intellect is being used to create faulty logic. And many people they mix up their traumas with Gyan and end up with extremely faulty logic, which they are adamant about. And there's nothing you can do to wake them up. And that's just one of those things. So in this way, the intellect gets turned around. And also you find there are many BKs around you who think like that too. And so you feel validated to think like that. And because they use expressions which are about something spiritual, but they take it in a way which is something physical, and they can't tell the difference. And they end up with faulty logic and they don't get it. And so you can't really do too much about it, because somebody who's got fixed ideas they're not open to intelligence. You can't have an intelligent conversation. So then you have to take care of yourself around it. And that's just a phenomenon that you need to know how to manage. So if someone is fixed in that, you say, well, part in drama, nothing you can do. Like sometimes Baba says, he tells you everything, but if you don't act on it, what can the Father do? And you are in a similar situation. And so when you ask this question, what does it mean? The consciousness of mind makes the intellect turn around. The main problem of that sentence is that it's not been put in very good English, which has made it pretty much incomprehensible. So you can't be blamed for that, but that's the way it is. But if you understand that it means that you create faulty logic when you assume something spiritual in a physical way, and that consciousness of mind is not an English expression, cannot be comprehended by someone who knows English. It's just English words that when you put it together, what are you talking about? So either God is really weird and stupid, or I am. But actually, you're not, and he's not. But it's difficult to put these things into good English, especially if you're not English when you're doing it. So your knowledge of English is relatively less than someone for whom that's the first language. And so the best way is we think about it well, and we understand what it really means, and then we put it into comprehensible English, and then we talk about it. We have to really understand the difference between circular thinking and linear thinking. So when you meditate, in order to arrive at the skill in circular thinking, you have to take a point from the Murli. Any point will do, but do not take a point that's not from the Murli, because you cannot do circular thinking with any other material than the Murli. You have to understand that. You can't apply circular thinking to linear information. And the information from the Murli only works if you have circular thinking. So circular thinking means you start with any point and you develop that point. That means you collect up all the ideas that are associated with that particular point. Say you want to meditate on the soul. So you collect up all the things you know from the Murli about the soul, and you put them in a big pot. It's like cooking. There's all your ingredients, and you mix them up. Mixing means you turn it around and around and around. And when you do that, it changes it. It's like mayonnaise. Have you ever made mayonnaise? You probably haven't, because it got eggs in it. But anyway, if you want to make mayonnaise, you take an egg yolk and you put olive oil in it. And you mix it slowly, 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 and you put more and more olive oil until it becomes quite big. And it's got a certain consistency and taste, which can only be developed if you mix it up properly. And if you put all the olive oil at once, it won't work. It has to be drop by drop by drop. And so it's a very good kind of analogy for circular thinking. And what you arrive at the end of your meditation is clarity. Because you've taken into consideration everything that he has said about that point and churned it or mixed it up, turned it around and around and around the analogy that he uses, which is actually better than mayonnaise, is the milk, you see. And so he says that, okay, I am giving you grass. The Murli is basically grass, and you are actually a cow, and don't kick. And what you have to do is start eating your grass. And cows don't eat like this, they eat like this. And so the cow has to chew on the grass all day long. And the cow has 4 stomachs. And it chews on this grass to such an extent that eventually it becomes milk. So you get the milk, and that's good. Then you have to churn the milk. And so then you turn that around and around and around, and then you separate the buttermilk and the butter. And that's called churning. And that's not enough. The buttermilk, you throw it away. It's extraction of the water from the milk. So then you've got your butter, and then you have to cook that. And then you extract more water, and then you get ghee. So that is the cooking analogy of churning and circular thinking. Now, if you're doing linear thinking, you take any point that anybody came up with in isolation and you develop it, which means you have to specialize. And it means that you end up with a conclusion that doesn't take into consideration the whole. And so it's sometimes people say this is not holistic. So you have holistic health, which looks at your symptoms in the context of the whole, but then you have allopathic medicine, which looks at your symptom in the context of your bank account. And then you deal with it that way, which is very good for your bank account, but not necessarily good for your health. So this is the difference. And in Gyan, you get the ghee by extracting the packaging. And so the packaging is the context in which Baba gives us the knowledge. So he will talk to whoever's in front of him, which is fairly simple Hindus, mostly matas, and who are good in cooking. So they understand his analogies because they're very day-to-day analogies, agricultural analogies. Like, for example, the drama goes round and round, not like a louse. A louse never goes round and round in a fixed path. A louse will wander around in your child's hair until it's created too much mess. But the drama doesn't do that. The drama is the special type of Indian water wheel irrigation system, not a louse. And you have a long wooden thing, and you attach one end to the machine, the mechanics of the thing that brings the water up, and the other you attach to a buffalo, and he has to go round and round on a fixed path, and the drama is like that, and that is called Jew, and it's not a Hindi word, it's a Sindhi word. And if you translate it as a Hindi word, you get louse. If you translate it as a Sindhi word, you get this thing whose name I forgot, but it's got a nice Indian name. What is it? That machine. Nari, I don't know, I forgot it. There's a name for it. So anybody who is taking Gyan in an agricultural setting will understand that immediately that the drama is fixed. So Baba said, I cannot come 1 second earlier or later. This fixed drama, and it goes round and round identically every time. And it goes at the pace of a buffalo. And he's not going to go faster or slower. He's just going to go at his pace. Ox, yeah, ox. So that's that. Like today, the mehfil, happy gathering of moths. No, it's a gathering of poets who are thinking about the ecstasy of communing with God and surrendering to God in that. That's a mehfil. But is done by candlelight. And so there are moths who go into the light. And so people who don't know these things get it mixed up. But we can understand what it is. And once you get it, then every time you hear it in whatever way, you know what he's talking about. So it's okay. But at least you have to have the clarity once or twice. So.
Thank you, sister. And there's one question from Rini MUC. As I live in Germany, how to get rid of the idea or ethic or value of work is highest?
Well, right. Yeah, this is right. Hello, Renee. Well, I think it's about balance. And what happens is when you are spiritually wounded, which of course everybody is to some degree or another, you will use as a form of addiction that thing which is culturally acceptable. So some people, like nowadays, people get addicted to their devices and all of this because it's legal. They don't want to be addicted to something illegal, so they get addicted to something legal. Some people, it's a culture of food, so they all get addicted to food. But in Germany, the thing that's considered really good is work, And so as you get raised from childhood in Germany, you're told by your teachers and your parents and everyone that it's very good to work hard and get good grades, and this is in many places. In the United States, there's a lot of attention on good grades. And so you associate this with being good, but you can also use it as an addiction. And then you go out of balance, because an addiction is where you do something too much. And too much is when there are negative consequences from doing that thing, that you carry on doing it in spite of those negative consequences. That's what makes it an addiction. And so in addiction recovery, if you're using an illegal substance that you don't have to use, then the way to get over it is stop it. But you can't stop eating, you can't stop working, you can't stop breathing and all the things, but you have to bring it into balance. And that's very difficult. But Baba does talk quite a lot about Gyan, yoga, dharana, service. So we have to have all those things in balance. Sometimes Baba used to talk to me personally about balance of service and yoga, balance of Gyan and yoga, balance of time with the family and time alone, a balance of all the various different things that there are in life, because perfection in a logic sense is to become extreme. And so you get really extreme in one place and everything else is not enough. And that's very out of balance. Whereas perfection, the way Baba talks about it, is all the different areas of personal development need to be developed in balance. So you do a little of this and a little of that and a little of this and a little of that. So we can bring this to a conclusion along with our 9 o'clock traffic control.
Shanti.